Hello my friends, welcome to the first video on this channel. In this video I would like to show you my new Sony A6500 or Alpha 6500 camera. This will be kind of overview video, so I will go over the specifications, talk about strong sides and weaknesses, and then in the next couple of days I will make more videos explaining different aspects of this camera because there is too much to cover in one video, so stay tuned for that. So let's start with ergonomics and handling. And when I first unboxed this camera, I was really surprised how small it is in reality, considering that this camera packs a ton of features. Compared to DSLRs, it is much smaller than even the smallest DSLRs like Nikon D5500. The build quality is really excellent, it feels like a premium product. It is made of a magnesium alloy, it feels sturdy, and it is one of the best made cameras that I have had an opportunity to test so far. A6500 is a rangefinder style of camera, so there is no hump in the middle of camera to accommodate the viewfinder. The viewfinder is on the left side of the camera like on other A6000 series cameras. I actually prefer the rangefinder style of cameras to the DSLR shaped cameras because they tend to be smaller. There is a bit deeper grip than on A6300, which is good in my opinion. The viewfinder is very nice, 2.36 million dots. It can go up to 100 Hz refresh rate, and the visibility is very decent even in strong sunlight, although it would be even better with larger cap that you can get as an accessory. Magnification is only 0.7 times though, so I wouldn't mind the larger viewfinder. The display tilts only upwards and downwards, it isn't fully articulating, which is one of the downsides of this camera. So for vlogging, if you want to see yourself, you have to use an external monitor or an app in your smartphone. The bigger problem for me with the display is that it is unusable in direct sunlight. The brightness is not sufficient, and in sunlight you can maybe use it for basic framing, but that is also best case scenario. So you can either use the viewfinder or get an external monitor. I have put a matte foil on the display to reduce the glare and also to protect it, but it doesn't help much with the visibility. Display is also touch sensitive, which is a first in A6000 line, but it only lets you select focus points, so you can't use it for anything else. There is also a pop-up flash on the top of the camera. Nice thing is that you can tilt it upwards and use it as a bounce flash in case of emergency. And next to the pop-up flash there is a standard hot shoe. Then on the top side we have mode dial with manual mode, semi-manual modes, video mode, 2 custom modes, panorama mode, scene mode, and automatic mode. Next to that there is dial that I use to control aperture. Feel of this dial is very nice in my opinion. There are also 2 custom buttons and the shutter button, and I have to say that I don't like the shutter button very much because there is no haptic feedback that would tell you that you half pressed it, so you are just guessing what force to use to half press it, which is not good. I actually don't mind it that much because I use back button focusing, but just keep it in mind. On the rear side we have rather traditional layout for this style of camera. The 4-way pad does rotate, which is very good, and it saves you a fair amount of clicking, and I also like the addition of AF/MT and AEL toggle, so we can program that to do basically whatever we want to. And then there is a video record button that everyone criticized, but oddly I don't have any problems with it. It works just fine in my opinion. On the left side of the camera there is a slot for battery and SD card. I don't actually mind the placement. And on the left there is 3.5mm mic in jack, micro HDMI port, and USB 2.0 port that can also charge the camera even while you're using it, and I'm very glad that Sony implemented this feature. The menu on this camera is not great, but I didn't find it to be as terrible as on some other cameras. Both Nikon and Canon menus are, in my opinion, even worse. And this new horizontal orientation is, in my opinion, quite easy to use and to remember where the settings are. Moving on to the internals and performance of this camera, we have the familiar 24.24 megapixel aps-c sized CMOS sensor carried over from A6300, and judging by the raw files that this camera produces, it is also very similar to Nikon D5600 and D5500. I really like this sensor. It provides 14 stops of dynamic range. Low light performance is very solid in both stills and video. Although for maximal low light performance you would still have to go with full frame, but for my purposes I definitely find this sensor to be more than sufficient. It is also unclear whether there is a low pass filter on the sensor, but here again I can just say that I haven't found any decrease in sharpness in comparison to D5500, which definitely doesn't have low pass filter, and I also haven't had any problems with moire. The standout feature of this sensor is that it is 5-axis stabilized, which is very impressive considering how small the body of this camera is. At this moment, I don't think that I will ever buy a camera without stabilized sensor anymore. It is a great feature, it works quite well, it reduces rolling shutter effect in 4K video a bit, we will get to that later, and it also gives you more flexibility when shooting with lenses without stabilization. It improves low light performance by allowing you to drop the shutter speed if your subject isn't moving too fast. And this means that I can have proper stabilized picture while using the adapted mighty Sigma 18-35 f1.8 with aps-c sensor, and that is the lens that I will be using most of the time with this camera, and I will also make a review of this combination in the near future. This camera also does 11 frames per second, which is Nikon D5500 fast. So that makes this very capable sports camera and wildlife camera, although the tracking isn't quite as great as on the best DSLRs, but it is still very good in my opinion. A6500 also has improved buffer capacity, so you will be able to take longer bursts of photos and not be forced to wait while the buffer clears. Regarding the autofocus, that is one of the best things about this camera. It is hybrid AF with 425 phase detection points. According to Sony, it can acquire focus in 0.05 seconds, so it is mighty fast even with this adapted Sigma 18-35. It is very good with stills and just about perfect in video. And the video generally is great out of this camera, image quality is superb, also low light performance with this aps-c sensor is more than decent, even though for the best low light performance possible you still need to go with a full frame, but this is perfectly usable in most situations. This camera shoots 4K in 24 and 25 frames per second without cropping, which is great. So it uses the whole sensor and it downscales 6K video to 4K video, which unfortunately brings one major problem, and that is rolling shutter effect that distorts lines and make this jello effect. It can be quite effectively fixed in post. I will also be making video about how to do that. This camera can also do 120 and 100 frames per second slow motion video, which is great as well. And now let me show you a couple of pictures that I have taken with this camera. All of these were shot with Sigma 18-35, which is one of the sharpest, if not the sharpest lens that you can use with this camera. So to sum up this video, let me just tell you what I like the most about this camera and what I don't. So what I like the build quality, definitely the packaging, and that this camera packs so many features in so small body. Viewfinder is good, although the magnification could be bigger. Considering the size, the dials and the buttons are also sufficiently well placed. Even though I can't say that the menu system is very good, I think that it is actually one of the better menu systems available. I am a fan of this image sensor, it provides excellent image quality in my opinion. Autofocus is amazing, I really appreciate that the sensor is stabilized, and 11 frames per second is great as well. And also the video quality out of this camera is really great. The main points that I don't like. Well, first of all, the screen is unusable in a sunlight, brightness is not sufficient, battery life is below average, and there is a significant rolling shutter effect while shooting 4K video. But I will talk about that in another video. Regarding the overheating, I haven't had any problems with that whatsoever, but I haven't tested this camera in more extreme conditions yet. The biggest downside of this camera for me at the moment is actually the lens selection. There is no proper kit lens like Nikon or Canon 18-55 f3.5. There is just terribly soft 16-50 kit lens from A6000 and so on. There is, in my opinion, extremely overpriced and slow Zeiss 16-70 f4. And for me, the best option seems to be the 18-105, which is also quite overpriced considering that competition is selling comparable lenses for much less than half the price. Fortunately, there is the possibility to adapt lenses like I did with the Sigma 18-35 and Sigma MC11 adapter. This is amazing lens, and I will probably also buy Sigma 19mm f2.8 prime lens and Sigma 50-100 f1.8. Fortunately, there is solid selection of Sony telephoto lenses for E-mount system. So this was my short first impressions review of this camera. There is much more that I haven't talked about, so I will be making more videos about A6500. If you are interested in those, please consider subscribing. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it useful. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.